Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Terry. You have everything you need.
Thank you so much. Nice outfit.
Hi, my name's Terry, and I'm an alcoholic. It is an incredible privilege to be here with you. I am a blessed woman. I owe Alcoholics Anonymous. Of course, this isn't too hard a duty. I've been having a blast this weekend. Yesterday, we went to the Grand Canyon, and I come from Montana, and we have some majestic scenery in Montana, but we do not have the Grand Canyon. It's kind of amazing because I come from a place where I didn't think you could see God anywhere, and today He is everywhere. It is truly amazing. I really want to thank the committee and Roger specifically. I drove him crazy. I like all the details, but I don't listen to any of them. So I drove him crazy before I got here, but now he knows what it's like to sponsor me. And the only thing worse than sponsoring me is being married to me. But a few have tried. And I'm single, so if you think you're man enough, just kidding. I cannot believe I just said that, actually. My sobriety date is January 28th, 1987. My sponsor is Donna H., and my home group is a recovery group in Billings, Montana, and I was told when I got to AA that if I protected those things and respected those things, then I might have a chance to stay sober, that my life depended on it. And in fact, it really has depended upon it. And I have been trouble since the day I was born. That's just the way it's been. From when my sister was born, they kicked me out of the crib and they put me in bed, and my dad would put me in bed and go out to the living room, and I would pitter-patter right behind him, and he would beat my butt and put me to bed, turn around to go to the living room, and I would pitter-patter right behind him. It would go on and on and on. Ominous warning which they failed to heed. From that day on, they wouldn't be able to beat me enough or love me enough to get me to do anything they wanted me to do. And it didn't matter if it was my parents or teachers or the cops or anybody. I was born with this attitude of no, and you can't make me. And I've been a punk. I was a juvenile delinquent. I mean, I just kind of always felt like, I'm going to take my shoes off, but I promise that's all. I just always kind of felt like if I didn't have it, you shouldn't either. I was the kind of juvenile delinquent who keyed Corvettes and stole everything out of your car if you left it open, took your clothes off your clothesline. I mean, it just a punk, really, a vandal, basically. And I came from really what looked to me like a normal household. My dad was in the service, and my mother was a nurse, and we traveled around a little bit and finally settled in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in a little cul-de-sac where everybody's dad was in the service and everybody's mom was a nurse, and it was just a tight little community, and we did little kid things like play hide and seek and Mother May I and Red Rover, and it seemed perfectly normal to me. What I didn't know is that my father was a chronic alcoholic. And he was gone a lot as a Navy man in submarines or aircraft carriers, and he'd come back, and And he'd have an armload of puppies or toys, and we thought he was Santa Claus. We didn't have any idea he was a month late getting home after coming stateside. There just was no sign. There was no violence in the household or anything like that. And we went to church every Sunday. We had Stingray bikes. I mean, just really normal, it looked like to me. And I learned in church what I was taught in AA, that God answers unselfish prayers. And one day my dad came home and he took us kids out in the garage, and he said that he and my mother were getting a divorce. And I tell you, as a little kid, that just tipped me over. And I prayed every night, just cried myself to sleep praying every night that God would keep my family together, because as a small child, that seemed like an unselfish prayer to me. And when that didn't happen and we got in our car to move to Billings, Montana, I made a conscious decision at the age of about 11 that the God idea was a big, fat lie. And not only couldn't you depend on God, you couldn't depend on your parents either, and that if anything was going to happen in my life, it was going to be because I made it happen. And I got to Billings, Montana, a very angry little girl, and it didn't take me long to find angry little boys and girls just like me, other little juvenile delinquents. And I think not the first time I drank, but the first time I felt the effects of alcohol, I was probably about 13 years old, and we were swimming in the big ditch because you're not allowed to, and I like to do what I'm not allowed to do. So we gotten out of the big ditch and we were sunning on the bank, and somebody pulled out I say 5-finger lid, but anymore a lot of people don't know what that is. It's a big bag of pot is what it is. And boy, you couldn't afford one of those today, that's for sure. And a bottle of Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill. And yeah. Do we all start with that? Mad Dog 2020? I mean, woo! And I can't even say I remember what it tasted like, but I will tell you I remember what it felt like. I took a drink and it felt like it filled up every empty part of me. And from that moment on, I didn't even know how bad it was until it felt so good at that moment. It burned going down, and from that moment on, that's what I did. I paid any price. I'm not somebody who ever drank without consequence. And so I was in and out of jail all the time, and by the time I think I was about 14, I was made a ward of the state, remanded to the custody of my mother, which meant that if I just got out of hand, she could call the cops and they'd take me to jail. And I kind of thought of myself as a free spirit. I'd just be going along pretty good for a couple days, a couple weeks maybe, and then something inside of me would, I just have to go somewhere and do something else and be with somebody else. And I thought that was a free spirit. And when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, they described that as restless, irritable, and discontented. They called that alcoholism. That was an eye-opener. So I was, like I said, just a punk in and out of jail. I ran away all the time. I mean, all the time. And in the 9th grade, I ran away and I lived in a garage with, there were 3 motorcycle clubs that had homes together, houses together, whatever. And I lived there for 3 months, and I remember going back to the 10th grade trying to be a 10th grader. And it's really hard to live that kind of lifestyle and then go back to school and try and be a 10th grader. When I was there, I picked somebody I was with, because if you don't pick somebody you're going to be with, you get to be with everybody. And I did stuff like I went to Sturgis when I was 14 years old, and it wasn't a tourist place like it is today. I mean, it was just some badass things going on back there. And the truth is I like that kind of stuff. I'm a rowdy drunk. I like rolling around in the mud and the blood and the beer. I like to fight, and I don't care if you're a man or a woman or big or small. I just really don't care. And I learned about that in reform school, because I ended up in reform school about the time I was 15 in the early 70s. Again, that's not some place you want to be. And I was the only white girl there, and I just took a lot of crap and got pushed around. And my mom and dad, in the meantime, had gotten married again. Happens a lot with us. We got to keep trying it over and over again. And anyways, he'd come back to take his rightful spot in our family as my father, and that didn't work out for me. It didn't work out for him worse, but anyways, he called me in reform school and he told me that they were getting divorced again, and I just was full of rage. And the next morning we single filed into breakfast, and this one big girl said something to me, and I just came loose all over her. Every ounce of rage inside of me. And I didn't even win that fight, but what I got from that was respect from everybody else there. Everybody quit pushing me around and calling me names, and I took that lesson with me. And so I was never afraid to hit the biggest person in the room, because it doesn't matter if you win. It only matters that people respect you, or at least think you're crazy enough to leave you alone. And so that's just kind of the way I live my life, really, with monotonous regularity. As before I was 18, in and out of jail and reform school, and just a drain on my family. I was a complete source of disappointment and embarrassment everywhere I went for my family. When I was a senior in high school, I got pregnant, and again, back then you weren't going to school pregnant and that kind of stuff. So I went to night school and got all my credits, and demanded to be reinstated at my high school and walked down the aisle, because I have worked so hard. I barely showed up in school, but I felt like it was my right to walk down the aisle with a diploma. That's the kind of ego that I have. I sponsor women who have such low self-esteem, they don't think they deserve a job as a speed bump. And I'm kind of like, you don't deserve to breathe my air. And I don't know where that comes from, except for maybe fear. Really, I just get big and loud, and you guys don't know that I'm afraid. So, excuse me there. By the time I was 18 years old, I had given that child up for adoption. I was a full-blown alcoholic, and I was enrolled in the Colorado Institute of Art, and I met somebody else's husband and got drunk and missed it. And then I ended up marrying this guy, well, after he got divorced. And I married him, and he drank just like I did. And it was an incredibly violent and scary marriage. And pretty soon our friends dropped away, because you just never knew what was going to happen when Terry and Ray started drinking together. And one night I'd asked him if he wanted to go out, and he said no. And so I did, and I got home about 5 o'clock in the morning. Normal time you get home after going out to the bar at night. And he wasn't there. I remember being kind of angry that he'd gone out without me after I'd been so polite and asked him to go with me. And so I just kind of passed out in the driveway for a while, and when I woke up, he still wasn't there, and I crawled in the window, and there was a note from him that he'd left me. And I thought, he left me. He was the sick, violent guy, and if anybody was leaving, it should have been me. But the truth is that I don't ever leave those kind of situations. I don't have the ability to leave those kind of places, no matter how dangerous they are to me. I stay and stay and stay. And so he left, and we got divorced, and he stalked me for the next 4 years. I was scared to death, and every time he found out where I'd live, I would move, and it went on for about 4 years. And in the meantime, I had nothing holding me back. I didn't have a husband or parents or anything else. And I drank, and I met my new friend, cocaine. And boy, you can drink for days and days and days with cocaine. And so that just became my lifestyle. I hung around at a biker bar and got in fights, and just basically raised hell. I worked. I'd gotten a good job at about 20 years old working for the post office, and luckily it's just hard to fire a government employee. They did it twice, but I kept ending up back there on technicalities, and eventually they transferred me out to this little town outside of Billings, and And it was a great place for me because there was only one other person, a postmaster that worked there, and there'd be times that I didn't get to work till 11 in the afternoon, but I could still get my mail route done in time. And that's typical alcoholic stuff, man. We can get her done if we need to get it done. And I did. I never showed up for work on time, and if I showed up, and I'd be up for days and days and days, and I ended up getting pregnant again. And in my frame of mind, I decided that it would be easier to kill it than kiss it goodbye this time. And I never told a single person. I didn't tell the father. I didn't tell my best friend. I never told another person. It's just another chink out of my soul. And I just continued that way of life for years. And eventually, you got the bill collectors coming. I never picked up my mail. I worked for the post office, and they had to return my mail. That's a little humiliating, showing up for work. They're like, Terry, you're not picking up your mail. Yeah, I don't care. And so it just went on. I think about there was a story in the big book. I'm not sure if it's still there in the 4th edition. It was called, I believe, Golden Slipper, and there was a line in there, and it said, alcohol gave me wings to fly, and then it took away the sky. And I'm telling you, that is exactly my story. It seemed like I had so much fun when I started drinking. One time we were in the Point in Billings. You just go around and around and basically get drunk and look for fights. And I threw a beer can in this car that was going by, and it took off to chase us, and we were just speeding down one of the main roads in our town, and it pulled in front, slammed on the brakes, opened the door. We went by, and we took that door right off. And we thought, whoa, that is cool. We laughed and laughed, talked about it for days. Never occurred to me till I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and was looking back at that stuff. Did we take an arm or a leg? I never had that kind of thought process before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no thinking of what the consequences were going to be. And then it took away the sky. I mean, my life became getting up in the morning and doing a blast so I could clear my head enough to get it together to get to work, and guzzling vodka so I could pass out at night. I ended up getting pregnant again. You'd think I'd figure that out, but no. And so now I'd had a lot of people addressing my drinking, like, when are you going to quit drinking? You need to quit drinking. Your drinking's a problem, beyond my boss and boyfriends and husbands. And I'd always told him, I'll quit drinking when I'm ready to quit drinking. I'll be deciding, not you. And when I got pregnant this third time, I'm 26 years, and I'm like, okay, girl, this is it. It is time to pull it together. You've given a child up for adoption. You've had an abortion. You're 26 years old. It's time to pull it together and be a mom and quit drinking. And I couldn't do it. And I drank and did cocaine every single day of my pregnancy and hated myself for it. I woke up in the morning so full of self-loathing and went to bed every night hoping that I would die. And when I was 6 months pregnant, I'd been out all night the night before with my girlfriend's boyfriend, because I don't care. And we'd been drinking and snorting cocaine, and I never went to bed before I went to work, and I hadn't eaten anything, and I finally got home, and I was so hungover and so strung out. All I wanted to do was go to bed, and I laid down, and my phone started ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. I remember I was standing on top of that waterbed and jumping up and down and screaming at the phone to shut up. I mean, I can't even function as a normal human being. I don't get my mail out of my mailbox. I don't answer my phone or my door, and the curtains are pulled at night. And so finally the phone stopped ringing, and I laid down and went to bed. And at the time I was living with one of my sisters, and she was pregnant too. We were like all we had left. Even the kind of friends I had kind of frowned it on drinking and snorting lines of cocaine with pregnant women. And so it was her and I at the kitchen table every night. But about 10 o'clock that night, the phone or the doorbell rang, and she opened it, and it was the cops. And they'd been trying to serve some warrants on me, so it was kind of abnormal for her to be opening the door to a cop anyways. But he asked for me, and she came and woke me up, and he asked me if I knew Sandy Couson, and I said, yeah, that's my little sister. And he said, well, she was shot. And I'm like, oh my God, how is she? And he goes, no, your sister was killed today. And my sister had gotten herself in a bad situation, and she was calling me for help, and I was too screwed up to answer the phone. And she was brutally beaten and sodomized and pistol whipped and shot. And I couldn't even answer the phone. And I don't know what you guys do with stuff like that, but what I do is I drink and I snort and I pop and I smoke absolutely anything I can get my hands on. And I just wanted to die, and I wanted that baby to die too. I felt completely responsible. If I could have just picked up the phone, she wouldn't be dead. And I hated myself. And so for the next couple months, I swear to God, I just tried to bury myself in booze and drugs. And that happened in May, and in September was the trial, and I could not pull it together. I had that baby 2 days before the trial and packed him up and went from Montana to Nevada, and I couldn't hold it together even for that 2 weeks. I went out every night and got drunk and humiliated myself and my family, and it just was a bad deal. I would stand back there where they brought him up in his shackles, and I would just stand there and try and kill him with my eyes. I just had so much hate and rage and disgust in my heart, not just for him, but for me. And at the end of that trial, he got 2 life sentences without parole, and I thought that would help. I really thought that would help, and it did not. And I just continued with the way that I've been living, just trying to drink and die every day. And Super Bowl Sunday, 1987, I'd been out all night, and I was passed out on the couch, and the doorbell rang because the party's at our house. And that day, I drank vodka out of the quart bottle and beer, and I was snorting cocaine out of a baggie with a tablespoon. And at 10 o'clock that night, I was stone cold, straight and sober, and scared to death. I couldn't drink enough or snort enough to even get any effect whatsoever. And I remember going to bed that night and crying and trying to be quiet so I didn't wake him up, because he would ask me what was wrong, and God, I wouldn't even know what to tell him. It's just so screwed up. And the next day I got up and I went to work, and I didn't drink. And I didn't do any cocaine. And the truth is, on that day, that Monday, I had run out of family and friends and money and the energy to do what I needed to do to get what I needed. I just couldn't do it. And the next day I didn't drink or do any drugs, and the next day I didn't either. And that night, Wednesday night, I went to bed, and I didn't know anything about detoxing or anything like that. I just thought, I am going crazy. And I decided, my dad had moved to a little town outside of Billings, and my dad taught me some really important life lessons. One was, when we were a little kid, he'd have us punch him in the stomach as hard as we could, and he'd hang us from his biceps, and he'd always say, you can't hurt steel, you can't hurt steel. And I kind of took that to heart. That's what I became. I became steel, and I've been beaten and gang raped, and can't hurt me. And he also taught me that if you're going to have a gun, you have it loaded, and don't ever point it at somebody unless you're willing to pull the trigger. And I knew that my dad would have guns and that they'd be loaded. And so that Wednesday night, I made the decision that that's the only way to fix this. It's too big. It's the only way. I didn't know that I'd come to the end of my drinking. I thought I'd come to the end of my life. And about that time, I decided that little baby started crying, 4-month-old little baby. And I remember thinking, can I let this baby grow up thinking its own mother didn't even care enough to stick around? And I didn't do it. And the next day, I didn't drink. And the next day, I didn't drink. And I was crazy. And I had not drank. For years, I drank every single day, and now I'm 5 days from my last drink. And that Friday night, I got a call, and it was that crazy ex-husband of mine, the one I'd hidden from. And he called me up, and he asked me how I was doing, and I don't even know why I was honest with him, but I just told him I can't I can't do it. I'm not going to make it one more day. And he was 2 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was calling to make amends.
Woo!
And he 12-stepped myself and my sister into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my sister and I share the same sobriety date, and I promise you my mother loves Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he asked me that night when he came over with the big book and talked to us if I was willing to pray to a higher power. And that sister of mine that was so brutally murdered, she was a biker too, but she loved Jesus. I mean, they found a New Testament in her purse, and I already knew the God idea was a big fat lie, and if that's what God does to the people who really love him, then I want no part of it. But he asked me if I was willing to get on my knees and pray to a higher power, and I was willing to try it. I got on my knees just in case. And I prayed that third step prayer that night, and I have prayed it probably every day, but maybe a handful of times since the day I got sober. And he took us to our first meeting the next night. I don't remember anything really except for it was really dark. Come to find out it wasn't. It just seemed really dark. And I remember one thing that they said there. They said that you don't ever have to drink or do drugs again, and we will show you how. And that brought me back to my next meeting, and my next meeting, and my next meeting, and my next meeting. I had been going to the meeting for about 2 weeks when I ran into this guy that I used to party with. I mean, just like me, we used to even actually hole up in a hotel so we could drink and do cocaine without judgment. He used to call it hearing the eagle scream. You do as much as you can and not die. And he had been sober for 4 months. I didn't even recognize him. He'd even changed physically. And he came up to me, and I thought, man, if Pat can do it, maybe I can too. And I kept coming to AA. I got into outpatient treatment center, and in that treatment center, they demanded that we go to so many AA meetings, which I already was, but they also made us make AA contacts, like we had to go out to coffee with people, which is crazy, going out sober just to drink coffee. So I'd drink a couple gallons of coffee on Friday night, and I still drink like that, actually. But so I'm going to AA, and I'm sober, and they demanded that I get a sponsor, and it was actually the woman that did the aftercare and treatment just kept saying, you got a sponsor, you got a sponsor, you got a sponsor. And finally said, why don't you be my sponsor? And she's like, yeah, I will. But she ended up getting transferred almost right away, and she told me to find another sponsor, and so I did. And I'm like, I found a sponsor, and she's just like me. She has this little kid, and Sandy said, wrong, Leroy will be your sponsor. And I'm like, that horse's ass? And she's like, yeah, just like you. And he just was this gruff old guy. I tell you, anytime you asked him something, he'd say, what are you going to do about it? I used to call him with problems, and he'd say, write a gratitude list of 20 things and call me back. I promise I never called that man back. Never. Gosh, there was never 20 things to be grateful for when I got sober. And so anyways, he got me really involved in service. He was a service guy, and I was going to assemblies and district meetings. He had me run for GSR, and I said yes. I never showed up for the business meeting. I was so new, I didn't know that was part of it. So I didn't get to be GSR since I didn't show up at the service meeting. But anyways, I got way into service and involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and things started looking up. For one thing, if you quit spending $500 a day on cocaine, you have a lot more money to work with. And so it got real good out here, like real fast. And I was about 3 years sober, and something started happening inside of me. I can't even describe what it was except for dread and despair. And every day I would wake up and I'd have a little more and a little more and a little more. And I ended up with this feeling like the same feeling I'd walked in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous with, this hopelessness that life wasn't going to get better. And I was at a meeting one day, and we had this kind of meeting where it was a perfect meeting for me, but it was like they'd ask if anybody has a problem, and somebody'd say the problem, then everybody'd share their experience with the program, and everybody would leave feeling very unified that we all have the same problem. Never a solution, but this particular day, this woman who had never been to this meeting before showed up, and when it got to her, she opened the big book and she said something about a spiritual way of life which will solve all your problems. And I'm like, I heard that. And I asked her for my phone number. I certainly didn't ask her to sponsor me, but I asked her for her phone number. And the next week she was at that same meeting. She taught me an important lesson, that I need to show up at the same meetings consistently in case somebody sees me and hears me, but is afraid to ask me to be her sponsor. That the next week I came back and I had enough courage to ask her to be my sponsor, and she was there. And she taught me to go to the same meetings consistently, so if that happened. And she said she would be my sponsor, and she asked me to come over to her house and share a little bit about my story, and I did. And she said, your life needs a miracle, and only God does miracles, and I think you're going to find him in the pages of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, we're going to get together every week for an hour, and we're going to read every word, and when we come to a step, we're going to work it the way it's outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what we did. And my life was transformed by the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous from the inside out. I'd been in AA for 3 years and never worked the program. And I thought I'd done AA and it didn't work. And I didn't realize that the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous were the program. And incredible things started happening in my life. The third step was an incredible experience for me. She had me get on my knees and do that prayer. And then that fourth step, I'd never done a fourth step like it's outlined in the big book. Never got to the part about me. Certainly not the part about me. And she had me make that list of the people, places, and things that I resented, and what the resentments were, and what was affected, and what was my part. And I got to look at the truth about Terry. And it was not pretty at all. And I did that fifth step, and I remember leaving not on the pink cloud that I'd always heard everybody talking about, but I left that fifth step looking at the truth about me. And thank God for the rest of the steps. I'll tell you that. I could have never stayed sober just looking at that. I'd finally stopped long enough to turn around and see the monster, and it was me. And we got to those amends, and I'd always had this hate-love relationship with my dad. He'd beaten me when I was a kid when my parents got remarried, and one time he beat me so bad I had rug burns from my forehead to my belly button, and my mother said, you have every right to call the police, but your dad's an alcoholic. He's a sick man. And
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
My plan was just to hire some of my hoodlum friends to take him out, but I never did that, thank goodness. But I certainly didn't not call the cops because he was an alcoholic, a sick man. That's not why I did not do it. And I had this hate-love relationship. I hated that it mattered to me what my dad thought about me. I hated that I loved him regardless of what he'd done. And what I found out during my ninth step is that my dad had 9 dads. No one ever stuck around long enough in his life to love him and teach him how to be a dad. And my dad was an alcoholic, a sick man just like me. And when I got to that part in the 4th step where it says, we realize that those who harmed us were perhaps spiritually sick, my sponsor said realize meant to think in a new way, and that spiritually sick meant cut off from God. And after I did my 5th step, she told me, Terry, all that stuff in your 4th step, even the adoption, the abortion, all that stuff was the absolute best you could do without God's help. And your dad did the absolute best he could do without God's help. And she said, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be showing up in your dad's life for an hour once a month. And my dad, like I told you, was an alcoholic. He owned his own stool in a bar in a little town outside of Billings. And that's where I went once a month and sat in that bar with an hour for my dad, just trying to be a daughter. And God kept me protected. You know, even in early sobriety, for years I went and I spent an hour with my father each month. And my dad got sick in 1999. And the year before, he'd broken his hip and ended up in the hospital and in a nursing home to recover. And he couldn't get a drink. And he had his friends bring down his car and leave the keys in the parking lot. And he escaped from the old folks' home. And so when he got sick, he wouldn't go to the hospital. I said, Dad, you just got to go, see what's going on. He goes, if you promise to bring me home, I'll go. And I took my dad to the doctor, and the doctor said, if you don't hospitalize him immediately, he'll be dead within 2 weeks. And I took my dad home because I promised him that I would. And when my dad got too weak to hold his own drink, I held it for him. And I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I know what it's like to need a drink. And my dad died within 2 weeks in my home under my care. And there was no hate. There was a level of love and compassion and humility I don't know if I'll ever feel again. He was a sick man, an alcoholic just like me, and when he died, I loved him with all my heart. And yeah. That man did the best that he could. As it turns out, everybody did, and everybody still does the absolute best that I can. My mother, who I tortured for years, I was probably about 15 or 16 years sober. We were at Thanksgiving, and my family truly is healed, all healed up from this stuff. And we were at Thanksgiving, and she was making a joke, and she said, the only thing I knew about Terry when she left was she was gone. You know, like she didn't know if I was going to come back or if I was going to die out there doing what I was doing. She only knew I was gone. And she was joking, but at that moment, I got at a very deep level the exact nature of my wrongs to my mother. I thought it'd been stealing her money and stealing her car and disrespecting her, but what it was is I stole my mother's sense of security. There's not a night for 14 years that my mother laid down on her pillow and didn't have to worry about Terry. I stole her ability to have a relationship with my siblings. I was such a huge problem in that family. I sucked every ounce of energy she had out of it. And those are the things that I did to my mother. Today, I am my mother's beck and call girl. She calls me, I am there. I don't care what I'm doing. Part of my living amends to my mother is respecting and loving the Al-Anons in my life. I belong to a home group where Al-Anon and Alateen and AA meets at the same time, and we have a pretty tight family there, and I love those women. I know what they've been through. I helped, actually, and so I have this incredible relationship with my mother, and there's nothing that I won't do for her. And my brother, who hated me, because when my mom got divorced and we moved to Montana, it made him the man of the family, and I never gave that any thought whatsoever. And he spent all his time trying to get me to act right for my mother. My mother worked nights because she thought it'd be best to be home at the day with the kids. Wrong. She should have had that all the other way around. She should have been staying home at night to see what her kids were doing. But she'd go to work at 10, and I'd go out my window, and I'd run the streets while she was at work. And my brother just hated me. He absolutely hated me for what I was doing to my mother. And today we have this absolutely fabulous relationship. He is not an alcoholic. He got a DUI about 18 years ago when he was a wrestling coach and a Boy Scout leader, and he worked weird shifts, and he'd get up in the morning and he'd go to the bar and play billiards. He plays competitive pool, and he got a DUI one day coming home at noon, and he never took another drink again. And he's happy. He's happy. Me, I had those 5 days between my last drink and my first meeting, and I'm suicidal. You know, and I'm not someone who thinks about suicide when I'm drinking. I'm suicidal in between my drinks. But he got sober and he's happy. His wife followed us into Alcoholics Anonymous, and my family is sober and in recovery. That little baby I had, when I was pregnant, women were telling me that when I had that baby and they laid it in my arms, I would be overwhelmed with this sense of maternal love. And when they laid that brand new baby in my arms, I felt nothing, absolutely nothing. I didn't have an emotion I could get in touch with. I felt nothing. I handed that baby back to the nurse, and I called my boyfriend. I said, you got to bring me something. And for the next 4 months, I never held that baby to feed it. I would prop it. There were many times that I watered down baby formula so I could buy vodka too. And that's the best I can do without God's help. And today that little baby is 23 years old, and I have so much love for him, I can't even hold it all in my heart. He is, however, a freak of nature. He's ruining the family tradition. I kind of think about when I was 4 years sober, I'd stayed way far away from bikers that first 4 years of sobriety. When I was 4, I got my own Harley, and then I was stuck with the dilemma of single mom with little boy and Harley. So I used to bungee cord him to the backrest. And it seemed like a perfectly reasonable solution to the problem. But yeah, my mom was shocked when she finally saw me doing that. I guess he'd be back there with his little helmet, weighed more than he did. But anyway, so he gets into school, and he just doesn't have the soul sickness that I was born with. You know, he's okay with him. He played sports and music, and from day one through strong sponsorship, I was at every T-ball and coach pitch and on and on. He sucked at sports, but he really liked to play. He didn't even care if he sucked. He just liked to play. And one time this was when he was in junior high school, he was on the basketball team and he got fouled. And so he had 2 free foul shots, and everybody's like, and everybody knows him. Everybody's like, oh, Tanner. So he gets up there, he gets ready to make the first shot, and he pauses, and he makes it, and whoosh, right in. I mean, the gym went crazy. Tanner made a shot. The next one he missed, and, you know, that was okay. On the way home, I was asking him, I told him, I said, wow, that was awesome. You know, you made that shot. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I remembered to pray the first one, but I was so excited the second one that I forgot. And I'm like, you prayed before a basketball shot? My God, where'd you learn that? He learned that here. He'd been going to AA meetings since he was 4 months old. And he learned that from you guys. He's done Our Father more than most people that sit in church every Sunday. And he was in the pep band and jazz band, and he's a gifted musician. You know, where that comes from, I don't know, but he plays the flute and the baritone sax. He's self-taught on the guitar and the piano. He just has this gift, and he has this sense of self that he's not afraid to try anything, and he doesn't even care if he fails. He's a freak of nature, I tell you. One time he called me, and I was sitting with my sponsor having coffee, and he called me up. He was probably 18 or 19. He was out of the house, and he called me up, asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm having coffee. What are you doing? He goes, well, I'm going to get a tattoo. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm making these horrified faces at my sponsor. I mean, I have tattoos, but I don't want him to. And I was like, wow, cool. What do you get? And he tells me, and I just keep going on and on with this fake enthusiasm, making horrified faces at my sponsor. And finally he goes, well, what are you doing this afternoon? I said, nothing. He goes, you want to come with me? Like, you bet I do. So I showed up at the tap parlor with my kid, and I'm taking pictures, and afterwards we went to pizza, and he said, Mom, I got to tell you, I'm pretty amazed at how you reacted to this. And I said, baby, this is your life. These are your decisions, and I respect what you choose to do with it. That comes from you guys, not me. I don't know how to do that. I want to run his life and tell him what he needs to do and how to do it right, because I have all these horrible experiences, and God knows I don't want him to have to go through it. No, it's his life, and you guys taught me how to respect people and their choices. And you know, he was in the pep band playing, and that's not me. I was always under the bleachers, drinking Mad Dog, half undressed. I mean, he's an incredible kid. And today I just have this life, these relationships. Life, as it turns out, is all about relationships. And when you're steel, you can't have any. And today I just live this free woman. I never thought that God could take a woman like me and put me where I am today. Right here in Flagstaff, Arizona, looking at the Grand Canyon, seeing God everywhere I turn. It's, I got married again in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have this, I better find out what time it is.
You got a watch on, girl. 11:01.
Okay, one quick story and I'm out of here. And anyways, I got married in AA again, and I don't know how you do that either, but I don't do it very well. He had just gotten out. I was 7 years sober. He'd just gotten out of prison. He was in the halfway house, but I like it, you know? The only thing that would have been better if his name was like Snake or Mad Dog or something, but anyways, he was going to AA and he was talking about God, and for the first time in my life, I wanted a man who cared more about God than me. And he was talking about that, and we went out on this date one night, and he disappeared. Like, we were in the middle of a conversation, he disappeared. He comes back, he's got this bloody Kleenex hanging out of his nose. I'm trying to pretend I don't see it, and I'm gagging, and I'm like, I am never going out with this guy again. And a year later, we were married. And the truth is that we had a pretty good AA relationship. It was passionate, up and down, but we were staying sober one day at a time, and we were blessed in sobriety. And my son graduated, and we decided to open this big business. Always been his dream. You know, he was a truck driver all his life, and his dream was to open this big truck and trailer service center. And we sold everything we had, and we got a loan for $500,000, people like us. And we built and opened this 6-bay truck and trailer service center, and stuff was going on that I couldn't quite understand. And he wasn't coming home at night. He was going out and doing jobs on the road, and all of a sudden things just things weren't adding up. And I just tried to keep doing what I'm doing, you know. And one day I picked up his shirt out in the shop, and a Bud Light rolled out, and I asked him if he was drinking, and he said no. And just in short order, my husband, after 14 years of sobriety, started drinking again, and alcoholism raised its ugly head in my home. And I started looking in the mirror, pretending I wasn't seeing what I was seeing, and I started getting real sick. And I had to leave. I understand there are some women who can stay and be happy in those things, but I get sick. And I had to leave there. And I remember and he quit working, and we owe $500,000, and I'm thinking we're going bankrupt, and it just was a bad deal. I was really scared. It's the second saddest thing that's ever happened to me. You know, we had these plans. And it's when I finally realized that God has hallways, because I've been saying to the women I sponsor for years, if God closes a door, he opens another one. But I found out he has hallways. You get to stand there for a while till he opens the door. And I was in that hallway for quite a long time as we started to lose that business, and I lost that marriage. And I finally got to a place where, you know, I couldn't sleep at night and losing weight and just not being able to hold it together. And my sponsor told me, she goes, Terry, when you come to the edge of the darkness, God will either give you light or wings to fly. And I remembered God is bigger than anything. And I started standing back and trying to watch the omnipotence of God work in my life. And 28 days before they foreclosed on that business, we sold everything, and I walked away debt-free. And I know. It's amazing, and it doesn't work that way for everybody, but the results are all the same if I can stand back and let God be God. The results are the same. It's going to be okay. It's just going to be okay. And so for the last 4 years, I've been single and sober. And when I don't know what to do with my life, I do more AA. And I am more active in Alcoholics Anonymous today than I was back when I had that first sponsor. And I take meetings into the prisons and the lockdown facilities. And I don't step aside for the newcomer. I drag them along, but I need those kind of commitments. I go to 5 meetings a week, and I sponsor a bunch of women because it takes a bunch of women to keep me in my cage. But today I stand before you a whole person. No empty places. When I got to you, I had a hole inside of me the size of the Grand Canyon. And today I am full and fulfilled. I'm not powerful, I'm power-filled. 23 years ago, I got on my knees and I prayed to a higher power just in case. That is powerful stuff. May you find that power. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.